It is time to set those waivers for week number 11 and set yourself up for the stretch run in fantasy football and hopefully position yourself for a deep run in the playoffs. It's our waiver wire Q&A right here on the FanDuel Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope pages. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here as always by JJ Zacharies, and he is the editor-in-chief of numberFire and FanDuel. JJ, we are on to week 11. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very excited that I can now fleet over on Twitter. That's a big deal. I'm also excited to debut on this stream the Live in the Moment Cup. So everyone knows that I'm living for this show right now for everyone. My brain is only thinking about your fantasy teams.
I'm living for the Hard Rock Hotel in San Diego, apparently. So I guess we have our priorities straight here. Fleeting is very confusing for someone who does. I have an Instagram account, and I will occasionally post pictures of my dog there, but I don't understand Instagram, and I don't understand what fleeting is. Like, I know this makes you sound like an old. And
you're a boomer. You're a boomer.
No, it's true. Like, I'm old, but like, I don't like. It's good. I could use something where my takes go away after 24 hours. That's the thing.
I'm going to throw any controversial take in a fleet so that I don't get old takes exposed, a year and a half later.
Yes. And I think given my hit rate at quarterback, I probably need one of those. So, for the 2021 draft class at quarterback, fleets might be a thing. Joey says, or is asking, are fleets a buy or a sell?
Definitely a buy. I'm into fleeting. So the thing is, like, I have an Instagram and I'll put stories out there. Sometimes my Instagram is a lot more personal and like has pictures of my daughter and stuff like that. And my Twitter following is obviously a lot bigger than my Instagram following because I'm not posting like photos of my shirtless self or anything like that. Like anyone needs to see that. So on my Twitter, there's a lot more interaction. It's a lot more fun. So I'm very excited about fleets.
Okay. So we'll have to try this out. I don't know if I can get myself to do a fleet. I've never done an Instagram story, so maybe we're going to break new ground here on the waiver wire Q&A. If you want to ask some questions to get your waivers set, go to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Periscope pages. Ask your questions there. We'll get to them throughout the show. For today, this is one of 3 shows we have every week: Tuesday at 3:30, Friday at 3:30 for our snake draft Q&A with myself, JJ, and Brandon Gadula, and then JJ answers start-sit questions every Sunday at noon Eastern. Let's dive into the questions here for today. First one is from Joey. Hey, guys. Tilting way too much for Michael Thomas at this point. How do you view him rest of the season? Should I sell? Now, the change here is that Jameis Winston is starting. Jameis's average up the target in week 10 in place of Drew Brees was basically nothing, which was not encouraging if you were hoping that Jameis would be old Jameis. But what are you doing with Michael Thomas here, given the uncertainty at quarterback in New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Breeze injury changes things maybe slightly, but if anything, I think given the fact that Thomas has done what he's done the last 2 weeks, which is not a ton, coming off an injury, I would assume that you can buy him low as a result of that, and then you can buy him even lower, with this Drew Brees injury and us not knowing how long he's going to be out. I mean, it doesn't sound good, that's for sure. I mean, all the fractured ribs and the lung issues. So I would say that overall, I would probably lean more buying than selling Michael Thomas, only because, I don't know for sure if the change from Drew Brees to Jameis Winston is going to be amazingly significant. And I only say that from more of a fantasy perspective because Brees has been a fairly conservative passer. He's been one of the lowest, or has had one of the lowest deep ball rates in football the last couple of years. And generally that kind of helps Michael Thomas because he's seen such a high target share and he sees those lower average depth of target throws, and he's really just compiling numbers via that. He's not like Will Fuller or anything. But I could see a scenario where, Jameis is a little bit more DGAF. He throws it down the field a little bit more than Brees did. I don't know if we can take what happened in that second half, so fully and think that that's the way it's going to be from here on out, because he stepped into the middle of a game after not playing for a year, basically. Yeah. So, I would probably lean more of a buy for Michael Thomas because his peripherals haven't been horrific. And the fact that I think a lot of people are just really down on him.
And I think the good thing, too, is last year when they went to Teddy Bridgewater, the offense didn't change that much. Like, they've been efficient. Yeah. Their efficiency did go down a bit, but their average at the target was the same. Their pass rate on early downs in the first half was almost exactly the same. So they'll have the same offensive philosophy. If you look at Teddy Bridgewater in 2019 with the Saints, his ADOT was 6.2. This year with the Panthers, it's 6.7. So there wasn't a huge deviation for Teddy from the Saints to the Panthers. I think what that means is that Jameis will be down from where he was with the Bucs, but I'd still expect to be up from Breeze, who's at 5.4 for his ADOT this year. So I'd expect things to be a bit more downfield focused with the Saints, and that's a good thing for Michael Thomas. So the efficiency may come down, but it may lead to deeper targets, so I would probably assume a wash at the end of the day for Michael Thomas. Daniel says he is living the stream this week. Quarterback options are Matthew Stafford, Teddy Bridgewater, and Jameis Winston. Teddy and Stafford banged up right now. Jameis, we don't really know. I assume he'll play. I mean, Taysom Hill's there. But between those three, do you have a lean as of right now, given what we know with the injuries on Teddy and Stafford?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the Teddy one is a little bit more risky at this point, but I probably wouldn't want to risk either of them on Tuesday. So I would probably just lean Jameis because he does have that great matchup against Atlanta. Atlanta this season has allowed 7 points below expectation, or I guess above expectation, however you want to view it. Basically, what I'm saying to opposing quarterbacks, basically what that means is, let's say that a quarterback is averaging 10 fantasy points per game, which would be bad. But then they go and face Atlanta. We would expect them to score 17 points in that game. So Jameis gets that this week. If you were to say that Jameis is like a 14 to 15 point quarterback on a weekly basis, which I would say is maybe even a little bit low for what we should expect from him, then that means that he has a very real chance of getting 20 plus fantasy points in that matchup. And it's really not a great slate overall, not just the main slate, but just in general. I mean, we do get like the Seattle-Arizona game and such, but realistically, if you're streaming, you want those like really good quarterbacks and those good offenses to be playing against more mediocre offenses to sort of elevate that game in general. We want the Seahawks to play against, I don't know, the Raiders or something to make Derek Carr more viable, right? We don't have that all that much this week. But I think just given the status of those other quarterbacks, you probably have to go Jameis of those three.
Yeah, I think that's the plus there is, and the other thing too is like, if we get word later in the week that Taysom Hill will play more than expectation, like you probably will still have Stafford and Teddy out there on waivers. You can always go to them later because of the injuries. So I think that's the way to go. Go Jameis for now, reevaluate later if you must. Streaming defenses for Daniel. He's got the Vikings against Dallas, the Chargers against the Jets. That sounds fun with Joe Flacco starting. And then Washington against Cincinnati. It's kind of hard to turn down a defense facing the Jets. What say you about this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I like all three of those options, honestly. Washington, more of a traditional streamer. I mean, I guess all of these are sort of traditional streamers. But Washington, they're going up against an offensive line they should be able to beat. We've seen Joe Burrow under pressure throughout the season. And then obviously Dallas with a question mark at quarterback. What's going to happen there? The offense hasn't looked very good since Dak went down. And Minnesota's defense has been playing at least a little bit better. But yeah, I think that the easy go-to there would be the Chargers against the Jets. It's just a perfect matchup for any defense. That the Jets are going to either give up some turnovers and allow some sacks. I think it's just an easy one.
Yeah, it sounds like Joe Flacco will start again, and Flacco played well in that Monday night game, but it's also, it's still Joe Flacco in 2020. Andrew's asking, JJ, how are you valuing James Robinson when you are selling him, which is one of the 15 transactions you had for today? Andrew says he's having difficulties getting his league mates to bite. Is it safer just to hold him, or should he lower expectations for what he can get in return? So it's a situation where he's trying to follow your advice and peddle James Robinson, but no one's really giving him fair value. Is that a situation where you kind of have to, bite the bullet and hold that guy?
Yeah, so for anyone who didn't listen to the show, the 15 Transaction Show, which is on the Late Round podcast, one of my transactions this week was to sell James Robinson, and really it comes down to schedule. It comes down to the fact that if you look at his opponents that he's faced through Week 10, 5 of the 9 opponents that he's gone up against have ranked in the top 5 in terms of being an advantageous matchup from an adjusted fantasy points allowed perspective to running back. So he's faced the top 5 matchups that he could possibly face so far this year in 5 of his 9 matchups. The other ones have been pretty good too. I mean, the average rank has been about 10, and that's 10 in a good way. Whereas moving from here on out, the average rank is about 20 and a half. So it's about 20 or maybe 21 and a half. So we're looking at a scenario where James Robinson's not going to see as easy matchups as he's seen so far this year. And so from that perspective, even though he's seeing like 95+% of the team's running back rushes, his target share hasn't been as strong since Dare Ogunbowale saw some looks. Chris Thompson's seen some looks over the last 2 weeks. He did 2 weeks ago. Just given all that, I think he's a good sell candidate. Now, with that being said, the running back position kind of sucks. So if you can't get like an Aaron Jones type upgrade from James Robinson, if you can't get I would even say like look at a guy like Miles Sanders and say, I'm going to take a guy who's going to have a better schedule, more receiving work and upside, maybe not the rushing upside. But maybe your league mates might look at that and say James Robinson is better. And then as a result of that, you can upgrade also at the wide receiver position or another position. So you're getting realistically probably something that's a more lateral move from James Robinson to Miles Sanders, but others might view it as James Robinson being the better piece, and they probably should right now. It's just that moving forward, I'm a little bit skeptical. And then from there, you upgrade a different position too. Would I be giving him away for nothing? That's what I said on my podcast too. No, I mean, you should still be, getting something for James Robinson. I'm not saying that this guy's going to be irrelevant from here on out. A guy who's seeing 95% of his team's running back rushes will not be irrelevant from here on out. But I view him more as maybe like a low-end RB1, probably not to a high-end RB2 because the landscape is so bad. Probably more of a low-end RB1 when he's the RB3 right now. So try to use that and leverage that in a trade.
Yeah, if guys like Zeke Elliott are like running back 10 rest of the season, and that's kind of from rankings I've seen, that shows you that like James Robinson, despite being downgraded, is still a legit option. Right. I think that's worth keeping in mind. Running back is kind of gross at times. Jared is asking, he is a person that Drew Brees. Would you pick up Jameis Winston over Tua Tagovailoa, Cam Newton, and Derek Carr? Different options than we talked about before. Tua facing Denver. Cam gets Houston, which is kind of fun. Derek Carr facing Kansas City, also interesting despite a tough matchup. Would you take Jameis over those guys?
I think that they're sort of all in the same tier in a way. I might go with Cam might be the most intriguing to me from like a floor ceiling standpoint. In a plus matchup against Houston, Tua, it's definitely a beatable secondary, but I just feel like we don't have like the right feel exactly for what that offense really wants to do just yet. Jameis obviously comes with some risk, and then Derek Carr, his best outing this season came against Kansas City for what it's worth. So that was the one game that Kansas City lost. Do I think that's going to happen again? Probably not. I think of those guys, I might lean Cam and hope that he can get a rushing touchdown, hope that things can click a little bit. I think that game at least has some intrigue that it could be fairly high scoring, given the way that we know the Texans offense can move the ball hypothetically. Their defense isn't that good. Their secondary hasn't been very good. I wouldn't look at what happened last week at all with that Houston defense and say that's going to happen from here on out because of the wind and the weather there. So I might lean Cam of those four options.
Speaking of the Patriots, next one here is from Jake. Wondering if he should use the number one waiver priority on Damian Harris. He has Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, and Kenyon Drake, and the handcuffs for those guys. Obviously, Harris has some limitations in that he doesn't get targets, and targets are very valuable. The offense is not great, but it seems like he's solidified himself as being a guy who's going to get work even when Sonny Michel is back in this backfield. So would you use the number one priority on Damian Harris?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And you nailed it when you said that he's not seeing the receiving work. I would need that. And plus you already have good running backs. This is one of those situations where you're really adding Damian Harris to block another team. So if you have competition that could definitely use Damian Harris, then, I can kind of understand it, but I would be much more inclined to wait out and see if something happens over the next few weeks where there's an obvious must-have waiver wire ad and kind of go from there. And here's the other thing. The fact that Damian Harris is still on your waiver wire right now shows me that it's probably somewhat of a shallow league. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not like talking junk on your league right now. It's just the way that it is. So given that, there's probably going to be other options that pop up from here on out.
Okay, let's go to Chad here. He mentions that Jameis is obviously an option, but do you see Taysom Hill having any value? I think that this equation is different when we're talking FanDuel, where he is tight end eligible. And I think Flea Flicker, he might also be tight end eligible.
ESPN, he is. ESPN.
Yeah. So in those situations where you can potentially use Taysom Hill at tight end, is he worth an ad this week?
I would say that on ESPN, he's probably the best tight end streamer this week, just because like we know that they're going to use some red zone and goal line packages with him. We don't know how much he'll throw the ball. Maybe he sees 3 or 4 attempts in this game. Who knows? But it's not like he's not going to touch the ball in this game. And given the state of the tight end position, where the tight end won this past week, scored like 13 PPR points. So given the state of the tight end position, yeah, I would say that of the guys on your waiver wire, maybe like a Logan Thomas aside, Taysom Hill would be, for playing on ESPN, if you can play him at tight end, Taysom Hill is probably the best option for you.
Taysom Hill, according to Pro Football Focus, has set season highs in snaps at quarterback 2 consecutive weeks. So this is not just with Breeze leaving early in week 10. He also had 9 quarterback snaps in week 8 or in week 9, and then 10 in week 10. And he does other stuff too. He had a bunch of rush attempts. I think he had 5 rush attempts in the second half last week. And if you can put that at tight end, sick. Yeah. I think I'd do it for sure. Julian is asking about quarterbacks with Josh Allen on bye. We talked about Jameis Winston, Cam Newton. We talked about Derek Carr, but Carson Wentz is also there. Would Wentz rank above any of those? I know we talked about Cam. Would you put Wentz above Cam, or would you go Cam there?
I think I might go Wentz, but I say that obviously, a lot of these guys have very, very obvious risks. But, the Wentz upside, Cleveland's beatable. Again, the last 2 weeks, I don't think that we can really look at the Cleveland defense and say, oh, they have this amazing secondary, or last 2 games for them, I should say, because they had a bye. They have this amazing secondary when they played in these insane weather conditions where, of course, you're not going to see a lot of deep balls and plays down the field from Derek Carr and Deshaun Watson in that environment. I would say that, yeah, I think I would go with Carson Wentz. He has some rushing upside. He's shown that this season. He's getting guys back and healthy. Dallas Goedert's been playing. Jalen Reagor's been back. Zach Ertz apparently is going to Undertaker.gif this situation too. Or I should say it's kind of fitting, it's like the corpse of Zach Ertz and Undertaker. But yeah, I think things are at least coming together for the Philadelphia offense in a way. Last week was obviously bad, but I also think that we have to look at the Giants defense and say this defense is, we've been saying it all along on this, I feel like every single week on this show, where the Giants defense is not nearly as bad, I think, as people think or realize, right? Am I feeling good about what happened last week with the Philly offense? Not at all. But I do think that, there are risky options that you're comparing Wentz to here. So I'd probably go with him, but I think it's pretty close between him and Cam.
I am someone who had the over on 44.5 in a game that finished with 44 total points. If anyone were to be biased against the Eagles, it'd be me, but they get Isaac Seumalo likely back this week. So, as long as the weather's not bad in Cleveland again, which first look it kind of might be, I think that Wentz is actually kind of in play.
Quit playing games in Cleveland. Just stop. Put a dome over that stadium or something.
Yeah, let's get some Saran wrap to put over the stadium. Just do that temporarily for now. Tanantha, how do you see the Miami backfield shaping up if Matt Breida comes back this week? We saw Savon Ahmed have a really good role this week. Would you look at Breida there with that downgrade Ahmed for you? What are you thinking? Here's the thing. So Myles Gaskin's been out. He's been on IR. He might come back eventually. Assuming he will. Matt Breida is going to come back. Savon Ahmed has looked, he looked good. He saw an 84% running back rush share this past week, which was the highest among all running backs for Miami this season. I don't think he's going to just disappear. But the problem is, I think that we're going to see a very, very real committee. I don't think that Myles Gaskin's going to come back and take that job. I don't think Matt Breida is going to walk in and take that job. For what it's worth, I've dropped Matt Breida in a couple of leagues where I was just kind of stashing him. I have Ahmed in a couple of leagues too, where I'm holding on to him because of what we saw last week, and maybe that continues. But from Breida's perspective, I don't see a scenario where he steps in and sees enough predictable workload, any sort of predictable workload week in and week out. And I think the good thing too is the Dolphins have already shown they don't care that much about sunk cost. They understand. No. They're a smart team. I think. Yeah. I think we can say that right now, right? They're a pretty smart team.
Remember, I'm a Dolphins fan now.
Right. They cut Jordan Howard. They've used Myles Gaskin and Savon Ahmed. They get it, and I think that's encouraging for Ahmed because he keeps playing well, and that bodes well. Another question about Savon Ahmed here from Joseph. He says he got Jonathan Taylor, it's a start-sit question, and none of them play on Thursday. So Joseph, come back on Sunday once we know more about injuries and ask that one. Shrey is asking, hey, JJ, you said to buy Aaron Jones today, but his next 2 matchups are really tough. Is this transaction more of a playoff position team? They're 5-5 and need to win now. So do the matchups concern you for Aaron Jones? I know he gets Indy this week. Would that influence you if you're not a team that's already in position to make it to the playoffs?
So I know it sounds like that you're playing it safe by not buying a player when he has these tough matchups upcoming, but I almost see it as a risk because if Aaron Jones ends up going off against Indianapolis, it's a tough matchup. And then on top of that, he has a good game. The person who has Aaron Jones is going to feel more optimistic about holding him. So there's a risk in doing that and waiting. Is it a high variance play where you could come out more on top if you do wait a little bit because of the matchups? Sure, absolutely. So if you want to wait, you can wait. That's fine. The Aaron Jones transaction is more, he's had 2 straight kind of down games for him. And then there's also this narrative of, people saw Jamal Williams kind of start out that game as the lead back. He had more carries than Aaron Jones in the first half. But at the end of the day, Aaron Jones had the second highest snap share of the year. He had, his normal running back rush share, a fairly normal target share. I mean, it wasn't that outlandish of a game for Aaron Jones. So I would expect, it's the same old moving forward for Jones. So, given the narrative and the fact that he's coming off these down games and then he has a great playoff schedule, that's why he's a buy right now. But yeah, I mean, if you want to risk it, I can understand that you need to risk it because you're 5-5. It's more of like if you're 7-3 or something like that, looking at the playoffs, then you can make that kind of move.
I also think the end of that game is noteworthy for this week because they used Aaron Jones more when it was clear it was a close game, and they're probably going to have a close game with Indy this week. So I think that's valuable. They're trying to get that first overall seed, which they can get in the NFC. If they're going to use Aaron Jones in tight games, which they did in the playoffs last year, I think that benefits him in tighter matchups, which is weird. It's counterintuitive, but I think that's something to consider here too. Julian says he has Travis Kelce. Should he drop Dallas Goedert to pick up a second defense for the weeks ahead now that Kelce is off his bye?
I mean, look, I think that Goddard can probably help another one of your teams in your league. So there's some risk in doing something like that. But if you need a free space, I like having sort of this like free movable space on all of my rosters. I try to have at least one where sometimes you make some of these tough decisions and you just drop Goddard or a player like Goddard. In a vacuum, I would say no. But in a situation where I know what you're feeling in terms of like wanting that piece and wanting to just like have dart throws on your bench and getting a defense for an upcoming week, and maybe you don't have that much auction budget left, so you can't really risk, throwing some dollars at a defense every week. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that he's sort of like the baseline player, the last player that I would maybe consider doing that with. He's like right there. So, if he can absolutely help one of your biggest competitors, maybe I would think twice, but if you know that he can't, then I would just drop him.
If they're like me and starting Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert can help.
You're right,
so
right.
Would consider that for sure. OBP is asking, if you're a lock for the playoffs and don't have major lineup weaknesses, would you target startable players like Josh Reynolds, who may have a ceiling, like a ceiling capped ceiling there, or would you look at handcuffs like Devontae Booker? So you're locked into the playoffs. Are you aiming for guys you can start or guys who may have a path to a good role if something were to happen in their backfield?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a difference between being locked in the playoffs and locked into like a bye. If there's no way that your playoff seeding is going to change, I doubt that Josh Reynolds is really going to do anything for you. Do I like Josh Reynolds as an ad this week? Absolutely. I'm probably way higher on Reynolds than most. I mean, he's basically been Robert Woods over the last 6 weeks, right? And we're all, the thing that I mentioned on my podcast this week is that Robert Woods is rostered in 97% of Yahoo leagues. Josh Reynolds rostered in 5% of them, despite the fact that Josh Reynolds has out-targeted Robert Woods since week 4. So, do I think that Josh Reynolds is an ad? Yes. Is he someone, if you're undefeated right now and you know that you're never going to use Josh Reynolds, I would probably just leave him on the waiver wire, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And Devontae Booker, I think we can say pretty definitively now, if something were to happen to Josh Jacobs, he'd get that wrong because he's been really good.
Yeah. He was actually the 16th transaction on the podcast this week because he has some like borderline flex appeal to begin with, in deeper leagues. Not that I think that you're going to have to play Devontae Booker, but he's very clearly going to be, the Josh Jacobs handcuff. Yeah. And Jacobs hasn't really been the healthiest running back in the world since he entered the NFL.
Just exposed me for being a reader instead of a listener this week, for reading 15 transactions instead of listening. Charles, Mark Ingram and I are in a toxic relationship.
Same here. He blocked me on Twitter, actually.
Oh, wow.
No idea why. I have no idea why.
That is a different situation. Is he droppable regardless of whether or not he's blocked you on Twitter?
Yes, he's droppable all the time. Yeah.
What do you got to feel good about using Mark Ingram?
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to, I mean, realistically, like Ingram was great last year. That's fine. But it's a different situation this year. The offense isn't nearly as good. The backfield is pretty much just completely split. you're just never going to feel confident starting Ingram unless you get like injuries to both Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins.
Right, exactly. Zach is asking another waiver wire running back question here. Pick up Kalen Ballage or Ahmed? He only has room for one of them. So if you had to prioritize Kalen Ballage in an upcoming revenge game against the Jets or Ahmed, which way would you go?
I think Ballage is probably the play for the short term, and that's kind of how you probably have to think about these guys right now. I do think Ahmed has more upside longer term, but I'd probably just lean Ballage because we have to think sort of in 1 to 2 week, restrictions.
Doesn't your mug say live for the present?
Yeah, I gotta live in the moment.
Yeah, live in the moment. Pick up Kalen Ballage, baby. Revenge game part 2. Let's go. Jay-Z traded. Actually, that one's who won a trade question. Okay, so another one about the Ravens backfield. Thoughts on J.K. Dobbins the rest of the way? Sounds like if anyone could potentially be semi-trustworthy there, it would be Dobbins. But like even last week, the snap rate was fine, but the usage wasn't great. So what are your thoughts on J.K. Dobbins going forward?
You have to hold him. You can't drop him. You can't start him. I would just hold him on my bench. They have a really favorable playoff schedule from weeks 14 to 16. So, it's sort of, I had Marquise Brown as a buy this week, not because I think Marquise Brown is going to be this super fantasy relevant guy. I know how bad he's been this year. I know how frustrating he's been this year. But the reason I had him as a buy is because if in the next couple of weeks, some of those deep ball targets convert and things start to click a little bit more for this Baltimore offense, because we know there is a ceiling there at least, right? If it does start to click a little bit, all of a sudden you might have a little bit more confidence playing him in the playoffs when they get a really, really favorable schedule. So I view that way about pretty much all Baltimore Ravens players, whether it's Mark Andrews, whether that's Lamar Jackson, whether that's J.K. Dobbins. They're stashes right now. I mean, you can play Lamar Jackson, but they're mostly stashes right now, just given the way this offense has been operating.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating offense outside of Lamar, and even Lamar's been kind of frustrating too. But week 11 for DFS, it's Lamar Jackson season. It's back. Question here about Devontae Parker from Michael. Is Devontae Parker worth holding on for week 11 and the rest of the season? Now, Parker, the stat line wasn't good in week 10. However, he had a touchdown that was overturned. He actually led the team with 7 targets. And they didn't throw that much. So thoughts on Devontae Parker going forward for you, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's doing basically what we expected him to do post Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then without Preston Williams, there's a little bit of upside there too. I just think that Tua is good. So he'll know how to progress, and he's not going to be locked on to Parker the way that we would probably need him to be for Parker to be like a wide receiver 2+ from here on out confidently. But I mean, I think at least he's a wide receiver 3 moving forward, right? So he should definitely be rostered still.
I think that these in like the other thing too is they've been in a lot of super positive scripts. Like the 2 of their games have been in super positive scripts. They're not going to be able to run as much as they have. Like they'd seem more run heavy than they were with Fitz, but they're not going to be able to like just dust the game away in the first quarter like they did against the Rams. So I think that's worth keeping in mind too.
I said this earlier, I just don't know what this Miami offense is right now. I don't get it yet. I just need a little bit more of a sample size.
I'm hoping that with Tua playing well, they'll be more willing to open it up and throw a bit more. But like maybe that's just because I like Tua and like Devontae Parker and need Mike Gesicki to have a pulse. Like maybe that's just wishful thinking, but that's where my head's at right now. Final one from Samuel. Will DJ Moore repeat or do I sell him? Where are you at on DJ Moore, JJ?
I mean, look, I don't think that you can realistically sell him. I think that people will look at his game-by-game breakdown and see that he's just had these like spiked weeks and he hasn't been the most consistent asset in the world. So I hypothetically, sure, you can sell high on DJ Moore. I mean, Robbie Anderson is still the guy that I would want in that offense. Anderson's seeing 20+% of the team's targets weekly, like consistently. And it's a really frustrating team in the red zone in particular too, where they're not throwing it in the end zone very often. They're wide receivers, so they don't have that much touchdown upside, and that's a little bit annoying. But I still think DJ Moore is fine moving forward. I think he's still like a high end 3, low end 2, maybe even. I haven't really moved away from Moore the way that the consensus has at times. I know he's been frustrating. He had back-to-back really, really down weeks and frustrating weeks, but I mean, this is sort of what the offense has been all season long, and it allows for these really spiked weeks to happen for a guy like Moore.
It's going to happen. Like the good thing is, like, even though he's been inconsistent, like he's still getting usage even the bad weeks.
Yeah,
it may take it with Christian McCaffrey once he comes back, but he's not back yet, and like we also don't know when he'll be back. So I think that like DJ Moore is serviceable, and it's important not to not to sell him for nothing just because he had a good week this past week.
Yep.
That is all the time that we have for today. As mentioned, though, 2 more shows coming up this week. We have the Friday Snake Draft with myself, Brandon Gadula, and JJ, of course, there at 3:30 on Friday. And then JJ will answer Start Sit questions on Sunday at noon Eastern. So make sure you are subscribed on your platform of choice. We are on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope, and tune in on Friday and Sunday. JJ, I appreciate the time. Where can people find 15 transactions?
Yeah, so the article's over on numberFire.com, and then it's in the podcast, the Late Round Podcast, which can be found anywhere podcasts can be found.
All righty. We'll talk to JJ again on Friday. Good luck to all of you on waivers as you get those set back here on Friday for the Snake Draft. Also, big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with waivers and good luck in Week 11. We'll talk again on Friday. This has been the Waiver Wire Q&A.